Very good Sunday morning to each of you. I am Big Race Jim. You are watching Past the Wire TV. Sunday morning coffee brought to you by Shorebet Coffee, of course, and our good friends at Amwager. And as is a Sunday morning tradition for myself, pop up out of bed, open up some replays, kind of recap the day yesterday. Played fairgrounds a little bit. Didn't bet every race, but played the late pick four sequence, a couple other win bets. Overall, a losing day, but I think we learned some things. I'm going to apologize in advance. I wanted to do this show inside, but my children had other plans. Usually, on a day off from school, Sunday, they'll typically sleep kind of late, but not today. They wanted to be up around 6:15, 6:30. So I'm outside contending with the birds, as I'm sure you can hear. I've learned living down in Texas for the last 4 months, the birds are kind of loud and kind of nuts. They're like everywhere. But we got a little bit of a warm morning down here, just outside of Austin proper, and sorry, you'll just have to bear with me sitting on the little balcony as we go through some replays, recap some races, and cheers to a good Sunday morning coffee episode that we have in store for you today. So let's kick it off with probably my favorite horse in training right now, Sierra Leone, and I'll you got a kind of a mixed bag to talk about him, but let's fire up this replay from the New Orleans Handicap, and a reasonably clean break. Watching a lot of these replays, it seemed like it was tough for a lot of horses to make up ground in the fairground stretch yesterday, and perhaps that's an opportunity that this touch upon a star took advantage of. Quality horse, right? I don't think they're taking anything away from touch upon a star, but a really solid run from him. You kind of look at these fractions, pretty even race. Every quarter seemed to be about in that 24-second range, until the 3/4 to the mile started to slow down a bit. And I just wish Sierra Leone might have been a little bit more engaged at this point in the race. There was not a lot of pace to run into here, and it just kind of seemed like it took him a little bit longer than he would have liked to start to get going. And I think that a bunch of things could be true at the same time, right? A disappointing effort from him for sure, especially at whatever it was, 1-5 that he went off at. I wish Pratt had him a little bit more engaged sooner and didn't wait until the quarter pole to start getting him engaged into the race. And that's been one of the things that I feel like personally that I've seen in races where Sierra Leone is kind of coming up short. Now, granted, This horse is first time first time off the bench after the Breeders' Cup. So what are we looking at? November, December, January, February, March. So almost a 5 month layoff. So that alone makes him a little bit of a touchy bet um, coming into this race, especially at 1-5. Right, I think just that layoff alone kind of gives you pause um, in a race like this. Um, so that aside, personally, what I've seen in a lot of these races where he's come up short in the past, last year, um, namely a handful of those races at Saratoga, it just seems like he needs to be engaged a little bit uh, earlier in the race to be successful. You look at the Breeders' Cup; he was a bit more. He wasn't forward, but wasn't hanging off the back of the field in the Breeders' Cup, and he was able to swallow everybody up late. Granted, he had a much faster pace to close into, but I wish Pratt would have had him a little bit more engaged, a little bit more in the mix of the field earlier to maybe kind of uncoil that big late kick that we're accustomed to seeing. So, like I said, two things can be true. A disappointing race from Sierra Leone, especially at 1-5. Perhaps he needed one. Um, that's also true. Perhaps the race tactics could have been a little bit different. Again, I'm just a talking head on Past the Wire TV. I'm not I'm not on his back, kind of seeing what's going on. So, um, fully aware of that. But it just does seem like a lot of these races going back to last year where he was unable to get to the wire first, and that devastating late kick that we've seen from him on his good days seems to be non-existent when he's not completely engaged with the field soon enough in the race. Just my hypothesis, my observation from Sierra Leone, and I think that bared itself out yesterday. And touch upon a star looked good, right? It's tough to make up ground in that stretch. Um, and he hit the top of the stretch in front, and that was all she wrote. So kudos to him. And we'll see what these horses do moving forward. But at 1-5, you'd expect Sierra Leone to run a little bit better. So maybe second off the layoff, we'll see what he's able to do um, moving forward. But ultimately, I was a little disappointed. Was hoping he'd be a little bit more engaged in that race. All right, now for the Louisiana Derby, and again, on paper, John Hancock looked like the one to beat, but they're going quick up front here. We can see you get through this first quarter and into the first half mile of the race. These fractions were pretty swift, right? 23 seconds, and then this next one was about 47 change, I think. But he looked really comfortable here. And where's the winner? He's in that second flight right now, just kind of biding his time there, right behind the leaders. And This pace was pretty swift. I think it would have been super impressive for John Hancock to go all the way around, and it looked like he might have, right? Built, I thought, was putting in a bid here, and I was like, wow, that's if he could take over here and run through the stretch, like that would be pretty impressive. But he kind of leveled out and kind of bottomed out. And one interesting thing with Built here, you're going to see in a second. Like as soon as these horses come in on it, he wants to get away from it. And to me, that's kind of concerning moving forward. Like John and I have always talked about, we're looking for Kentucky Derby horses. We're looking for Kentucky Oaks horses. Like you want horses that are willing to fight and be nose to nose with their competition and dig down and put out their best effort. Built looked like he got scared and wanted no part of any horses being alongside him, and just kind of ducked in towards the rail. That's kind of concerning to me. We'll see where Built shows back up, but I didn't necessarily like that. But Tistastic, I thought was solid, right? Kind of took advantage of some decent speed up front and ran off, and that's what you want to see, right? Like this is the running style that wins the Kentucky Derby. Now again, we really haven't seen a lot of these horses that prep down in Louisiana, come back and win the Derby, but they're always a factor. I want to say the last horse that won the Louisiana Derby to win the Kentucky Derby, I guess technically was Mandaloon, and that was we all know what what the story was there. So it'll be interesting to see how these horses come into the Derby. You had Kings Barnes a couple years ago that ran really well, winning the Louisiana Derby, and he was kind of overlooked at the windows on Derby Day, and for good reason. I don't know that he had much of a chance that day, but a nice solid rendition of the Louisiana Derby. John Hancock, I think, probably just went out a little bit too fast. So we'll see what happens with him, but he faded badly. Built was another one that I'd have a little bit of reservations with moving forward, and we'll see what Tistastic does. But those were the three that kind of stuck out. That kind of stuck out to me and are worth keeping an eye on moving forward out of the Louisiana Derby. Good cheer. I don't have the replay to show, but good cheer for Brad Cox. Was pretty impressive, winning the Fairgrounds Oaks onto the Kentucky Oaks. Luis Saez seemed to really like this one in his post-race interview. So again, somebody to keep an eye on moving forward into the Kentucky Oaks. Good cheer for Brad Cox. Let's take a quick timeout. We'll come back. I want to break down some of these pace points that were pretty spot on. Had some really good information for Fairgrounds yesterday, if you were following along. So we're going to take a quick timeout, and we will be right back.
And they're off in the Kentucky Derby.
For some, they say it's the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. For us, it's about potential financial opportunities. Never bring a knife to a gunfight, and make no mistake, Big money is up for grabs, and this is a fight. Never settle for second best. The Past the Wire annual Kentucky Derby seminar. Nobody does it better. Preparation is key. Be better prepared, delve deeper, stealth. They won't see us coming and they won't know we're there. Money management, ticket structure, pace, all the intangibles, thoroughgraph, everything that matters to make it count, to have that edge. In the end, if things go as planned, it'll be like we stole the money.
All right, welcome back. Grab your seat for that Kentucky Derby seminar. Best seminar of the year. You won't want to miss it. All right, so here we go with these pace points. And there are a couple of good examples in here from yesterday. And let's start with race 6 at Fairgrounds. The 4, Go Sugar. This was a 5.5 furlong turf sprint. So, again, you have to factor these figures in with, how you want to use them. I think there's a lot of different ways that you can make these figures work for you. You know, just kind of talking with a lot of horse players over the years. A bunch of them tend to like those forwardly placed horses in these turf sprints. Like, now I'm not trying to compare this Go Sugar to Golden Pal, right? But what was so good about Golden Pal was that he just rocketed out of the gate and was able to put everybody in the dust and carry on, and oftentimes go gate to wire. So if that's an angle in turf sprints that you like, then this Go Sugar should just absolutely jumped off the page to you with this this first fraction ranking of 1 in race 6 on our pace points. Because what happened? Go Sugar rocketed out of the gate, said, "Come and catch me," and nobody was able to catch her. So something to consider when using these pace points. Obviously the surface and the the length of the race and whatever else. But I thought that was a pretty solid example for Go Sugar. Unfortunately, we didn't get the 9-2. Pretty sure we got 2-1. But I think I turned a $10 win bet on Go Sugar into $34. So not bad. And the pace points kind of helped guide us to that. The other one I wanted to share was this 4 in race 8, Tufani. One of the best closers in this race. And you had to think that there was going to be some pace to run into. This classic performer ran out on the lead, which pace points predicted as well. And Tufani just kind of left himself a little bit too much to do late, but was one of the best closers, if not the best closer in that race. So we've had a lot of questions, and I think this is a good example. We've had a lot of questions about this lengths lost in the stretch. And, does this for Fun with Flags, this 0 just means that based on our last fraction ranking, Fun with Flags is going to be, according to the sheet, we're basing all of these figures off of him running the best. So if you look at Tufani, only lost 0.12 of a length. So while we look at that and we can take that literally and be like, okay, so Tufani isn't going to catch Fun with Flags, but that's not really the right way to use this lengths lost and stretch. I look at it more of like like an energy gauge. Who's still going to have a decent amount of energy to be closing late? And there's not a lot of difference between 0.00 and 0.12. So Tufani was definitely a strong contender on this last fraction ranking. And what did we see? We saw him close like a shot, and needed another jumper to get there. Even with this, the Way to Be Marie, the 3-horse that ended up winning this race, even this, losing about 5 lengths in the stretch, like in horse racing terms, that feels like a lot, right? Oh man, this horse got beat by 5 lengths. But in reality, when you're using it on these sheets, compared to, more than half the field, Way to Be Marie should be, in the context of this field, considered one of the best or better closers, and having a decent amount of energy to finish the race, because they're not losing 13, 14, 20, 25 lengths, right? So I think the way to use the lengths lost in stretch is just kind of gauging off that top horse, Fun with Flags, in the 0.00, and giving yourself, I've found that anyone within that 5 lengths or less tends to perform rather well late in the races. So maybe as we, keep rolling this out and keep getting feedback, maybe there's a better way to sort of capture that number. Because if you do look at it literally, like, wow, losing 5 lengths in the stretch, like, probably not good. But in the context of everybody else, Way to Be Marie really presents as a solid late runner in this field compared to everybody else. So hopefully that kind of helps provide a little bit more context. Now, one thing I did want to mention, like, look at Sierra Leone. Again, in the context of this field, and a bunch of these horses didn't end up running, but as the fourth being ranked fourth on in here, maybe at 1 to 5, that gives you a little bit of pause. Like, we all hear about Sierra Leone's late kick. We've seen him circle several fields and swallow them up. But in the context of this field, there are other late runners that are ranked higher than him. Let me take a closer look. So, is this going to peg every single race in order every single time? Of course not. We'd be millionaires, and you'd be millionaires if that was the case. It's an extra tool that kind of gives you a little bit more insight into how these races may shape up, and how these short price favorites might or might not perform in certain portions of the races, to allow you to fade a favorite with confidence. Now, I'll admit, I had Sierra Leone on my tickets yesterday, but I didn't single him. I didn't have Touch Upon a Star, but I didn't single Sierra Leone. I thought this 9 horse from Japan, who ended up not running, I thought he had a shot, but I guess we'll never know. Anyway, my point is, the pace points can help guide you towards these low price favorites that might be a little bit vulnerable. And, looking back, maybe, you could have left Sierra Leone entirely off your tickets and felt good about it. It still made me nervous, of course. So I included 1 or 2 others, but I didn't single them like I'm sure a good variety of people did. And one other example I wanted to share in this Louisiana Derby. Look, Chunk of Gold, Tis-tastic, right? You had John Hancock as the highest rated, highest ranking, but as we saw, right, he was just cooked at about the 8th pole and started backing up. But who was there? Who was there? Chunk of Gold, Tis-tastic, right? John Hancock out front early, ranked number 1. who was right on his hip? Yinzer, right? Another forwardly placed horse here. And then what happened? Yinzer faded, which the pace points, predicted pretty well. And who closed? Chunk of Gold, Tis-tastic, which the pace points predicted rather well. So again, we're going to continue to keep rolling these out, but I just wanted to give a little bit more context on how to use these pace points to your advantage. It's not going to predict every race, how every horse is going, where they're going to be positioned early, where they're going to be positioned late. It's never going to predict that perfectly every single race, but it is an extra tool that you can use to have a better sense of where these horses are going to be and who's going to be who's going to have the ability to be closing late or set the early pace. Just one last quick one. Like, look at race 11, Good Cheer, number 2 on the late pace point ranking. Losing 1.59 lengths in the stretch. Quality horse should be considered. And what did we see? Just buried everybody. So, and that Ahava too at 8-1, like, I thought represented herself rather well, right? And losing 1.94 lengths in the stretch, not a lot, right? So I think that horse should have been considered as well. I included her on my tickets, and she ran a solid second at a decent price. So again, just a couple of different examples of how these pace points can help you find winners, and how you can help them, how the pace points can help you moving forward. Again, fully aware that it's easy to do after the fact, where we can pick and choose and, like, this one worked, this one worked, this one worked. But as we're starting to roll these out, I want to continue to share how to use these and what you might be able to pull from it moving forward. Right? It's just like going back and reviewing the DRF past performances, or the Brisnet past performances, or the Thoroughgraphs, and looking at patterns and seeing, okay, this horse performed in this such way. How did their previous performances in the PPs lend itself to that? We're doing the same thing with pace points. And I think yesterday's Louisiana Derby card was full of really solid examples of how you can use these to your advantage. So if you don't have the pace point sheet to go and review the races from yesterday, just drop John and myself an email and we'll get it over to you so you can go back and look and make some notes, because this stuff's coming. They're coming, and it's going to be out every weekend for everybody to get their hands on. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context, because we're getting a couple of questions about it over the last couple of weeks. All right, one more quick break, and we'll come back for the last sip. I've got a couple of things to dish on.
Go.
There's a lot of ways to handicap a horse race and a lot of ways to bet on it. But nobody that I know does it like Gio Setti and his full card, precise order handicap. Every horse in the race gets a predicted order of finish like only Gio can do, way beyond a deep dive, available exclusively on select days at Past the Wire.
All right, welcome back in Past the Wire TV, Sunday morning coffee with Big Race Jim, presented by Sherbet Coffee and Amwager. And why are horse racing fans not sticking? Why are the number of horse racing fans not growing? And that's what I'm going to talk about in the last sip. There's been a lot of talk on horse racing Twitter over the last couple of weeks about like Barstool Sports and Mike Rapoli and John Stewart and all of these, different people and entities that are trying to grow the game. And I think a lot of those efforts are noble, and should be working, but they're just like not. And you've seen Barstool at a bunch of races over the years, right? They had a thing with Oakwell Park either last year or the year before, where they did 1 or 2 weekends worth of content. Barstool works with DraftKings as their sports betting partner, and they had a whole thing last year at the Travers. I wrote a huge article about it for Legal Sports Report last summer. Go back and check it out. I liked it. I wrote it. I thought it was one of the better articles that I wrote during my time there. And I enjoyed that piece. And we kind of see these like little pockets of time where, Barstool's involved in horse racing. We see these little pockets of time where, John Stewart's inviting people to stakes races, inviting them to hang out in his suite at the Breeders' Cup and the Kentucky Derby or Keeneland or whatever it is. And you have these pockets of time where Rapoli's doing similar stuff. And all of it is good, but I wonder, like, why is it not sticking? Is it not sticking because the game is too hard and people play on these one weekends these one-off big days, and then when it returns to maiden claimers for 16,000 on Sunday, are they just no longer interested? And I think that's part of it. I think the game is confusing. There's a high barrier to entry for newbies. And right, I think when you have sports betting, right, you watch the NFL, you watch college basketball, right, or at least we feel like we watch the NFL and we watch college basketball, and we're in a position to bet, whatever, 5, 10, 15, 25, 100, $500, whatever it is, whatever your bankroll allows. And we feel like because we've watched a couple of football games or a couple of basketball games, we know these teams, we know these players, we know what is happening. You're consuming content. You're consuming content to give you, this this false sense of knowing what's going to happen. So when you're betting and you make these bets, you feel confident in your decision. Of course, the Jets are going to beat the Giants by more than 3 points. Of course, the Jets are a better team. We know playing the Jets rarely works out. Rarely works out that way. And I wonder if there just isn't the same sort of knowledge base with horse racing. Every race is different for the most part, right? We see horses show up every 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks. From one race to the next, the players change, right? Could you imagine if in the NBA or in college basketball, like the rosters were changing every game, every half, every quarter, right? It seems like that's more or less kind of like, in my mind, a good sort of analogy with sports and horses. The players are changing. The horses, the jockey, the trainer are changing 8 to 12, 14 times a day, depending on the track. And it's hard to follow these horses. Of course, you have these horses that are on the Kentucky Derby Trail, Triple Crown Trail. You have the older horse division that goes throughout the year, but and then you get their workouts, but you don't know like how they walked the shed row on Monday. You don't know, did they eat after the race on Saturday night? You don't know all of this stuff to kind of help inform your decision. But if LeBron James was out at a restaurant on Tuesday night, like that, but we don't get the same sort of information in horse racing, which I think is part of our inability to kind of feel connected to the sport, to the horses, to the industry as a whole. A lot of our fandom is kind of in these chunks. You don't find out for 2, 3, 4 months if a horse, got hurt and isn't in training anymore. Like you might have a hypothesis is when, they miss a couple of workouts and like, oh, this horse hasn't been on the work tab in a month or two. Something must have happened. But if, your favorite NBA player, your favorite NFL player, so much as has a stubbed toe, about it. And I think that sort of guarding of information makes it hard for us to cultivate fans and bring people along throughout the season, right? Because we're in the season right now. This is the season. This is the season where these horse racing entities can be sharing information, building a following, building fandom for horses, jockeys, trainers to get us through to May, June, and then into July and August, and then into September, October, right? Like this is the time. And it started a couple weeks ago. This is the time where we can be cultivating this fandom with information, with content. And for whatever reason, that doesn't happen. We get these one-off sort of things. You get Derby weekend. You get maybe Belmont weekend even. Because unless there's a Triple Crown, like nobody really outside of horse racing pays attention to the Belmont, right? Then you get into the summer and whatnot, and the attention starts to pick up a little bit. But we just get these little pockets. There's no narrative. There's no drama throughout the year because horse racing does a really poor job of marketing the players in the sport. And we're missing out on opportunities to bring people in through content throughout the year. There's no strategy with it. It's just, here's content around the Derby. Here's content around the Belmont. Here's content around the Travers. Here's content around Keeneland. Here's content around the Breeders' Cup. But we're not getting people from the Fountain of Youth or the Florida Derby or the Louisiana Derby. We're not getting people from the Louisiana Derby to the Breeders' Cup. We're not even getting them from the Louisiana Derby. Like you maybe are getting them from, the races, not even this upcoming weekend, the Florida Derby and the Arkansas Derby. Maybe you're capturing their attention the following weekend with the Wood, the Santa Anita Derby, and the Bluegrass. Maybe, but you're really only capturing them on Derby day before Derby day, and then you lose them. They're gone by 7:00 Derby night, right? They're on to the next thing. And then you don't bring them back. You don't bring them back until Derby Day 2026. And that's a problem. And I think a consistent, strategic marketing content plan gets them from this past weekend or even the weekend before and brings them throughout the year. Something to think about. And that, I'll wrap it up there. Went a little bit longer today, but a good pace points discussion. Again, if you need those sheets, reach out to myself, reach out to John. Happy to share them to you. Have an awesome rest of your Sunday. Have an awesome week. We're in the thick of it now. This is exciting times in horse racing. Sunday morning coffee with Big Race Jim, Past the Wire TV. Thank you, Shorebet Coffee. Thank you, Amwager. And everybody, sign up for that Kentucky Derby seminar. We'll see you next week.
In the Kentucky Derby.
For some, they say it's the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. For us, it's about potential financial opportunities. Never bring a knife to a gunfight, and make no mistake, big money is up for grabs, and this is a fight. Never settle for second best. The Past the Wire annual Kentucky Derby seminar. Nobody does it better. Preparation is key. Be better prepared, delve deeper, stealth. They won't see us coming and they won't know we're there. Money management, ticket structure, pace, all the intangibles, thoroughgraph, everything that matters to make it count, to have that edge. In the end, if things go as planned, it'll be like we stole the money.